Good evening, everyone. This is Tala with Drive-thru Therapy. Thank you guys so much once again for joining me on another episode of Drive-thru. Happy 2025. I want to set the intention, and I want us all to do it together, to set the intention that this year we are not trying to hit perfection. All we're trying to do is just be better than yesterday. That's all. Better than yesterday. And if we could do that, we are being more intentional and we are on the way to self-transformation. My own personal journey with self-transformation came about after digesting some very harsh truths about myself, about my thinking patterns, my adaptive skills, my way of coping, and how they've contributed to my outcomes in my life. If we come from a past that's been chaotic, more than likely, we've developed adaptive skills somewhere in there. It doesn't even have to be too chaotic. It doesn't even have to be traumatic. But we all have developed adaptive skills to adapt to the environment that we grew up in. And these adaptive skills would have been just fine and probably saved our lives in a lot of cases during the time they were needed or when they were established. Today, however, our job, whether in therapy or out of it, is to self-examine to see if some of those adaptive skills, which are now habitual, you don't even have to be in the same environment anymore, but we still think the same way and we still solve the problems in the same way. Our coping has to be readjusted if the environment is no longer the same environment that we've grown up with. What many of us may not know is that although we get older and we start moving out of our homes, having new relationships, engaging in new situations and new settings, it doesn't matter. Your brain still has the same habits of thinking and solving a problem. And even if there is no problem to solve, what your brain will do is generate the same thinking pattern, which sometimes causes us to find a problem when there is no problem. Because that's what your brain does. It's there to, the subconscious realm, big part of its job is to protect you. So it thinks it needs to do the same things it's been doing to protect you. But some of those habits that we use for protection that we may have used back then and served us well, today are no longer protecting us. They may be putting us in a self-sabotaging situation. It works against us in a lot of ways. So eventually, by the time we face this truth that what we've been doing has not been working or stopped working, and we are faced with this realization that I definitely need something different. I need to change. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to change because how I think, how I solve my problems is not working anymore with my current environment and what I'm trying to build or what I'm trying to do with my life. And this realization is so important because it propels the person to change. It motivates them to seek help and have the humility to receive feedback that's different than what they usually would do. And they're willing to do it. They're willing to accept new feedback and try new things out. And they're more likely to transform. So suffering in a lot of ways as adults serves a very strong purpose to help us get to this peaceful resolution of change. But unfortunately, our ego, the thing that we think is ourself, the beliefs that we stand by that maybe have been rigid perhaps or have kept us safe, these particular beliefs we've been affirming for many years usually will stand in the way when it comes to our change because they will not allow us to accept new ideas, new truths, perhaps new ways of solving a problem. We will stick by the old way that we've learned to protect ourselves, to solve our problems, to deal with our environment. And like I said, in a lot of ways, we do recreate this environment over and over again. We will recreate chaos, not because there's chaos out there, but we will create it just so we can use our adaptive skills. So this affirms us. We think that we are, in fact, correct. Our ego saying we are correct. Here we go again. People are not to be trusted. Here we go again. I need to defend myself. I need to argue with someone. I need to have the outcomes the way I expect them to be. I need to worry, even though there's nothing to worry about. I mean, I might be living a comfortable life, but I still worry. And so these habits, which those are our thoughts, our habits, interfere with the quality of living that we are able to have today. So it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how quiet your life is, how slowed down it is. In your mind, because of these past adaptive skills left unchecked, left unexamined, we're going to recreate chaos where there is no chaos. So transformation and suffering serves a purpose to get us closer. And we don't want to leave just suffering to mean nothing. It has to mean something if we're ready to change. We have to look at our suffering and say, okay, what is it asking us to do? What is it asking us to become? Because we got to become better than that suffering. We got to see what suffering is pointing to and help ourselves with it. But unfortunately, I've discovered that in the therapy world, there are different types of people and different types of timelines when it comes to transformation. If we're lucky to accept transformation and have the humility to accept help and new suggestions and new ideas, oh man, it's a blessing. It's a true blessing because it's not a common thing. A lot of us will discriminate against new ideas, new suggestions. We think we want them to be in a certain way. We want the solutions to resemble the ones that we've always done. And when they don't, we reject them quickly. So again, it's a blessing when somebody does accept new suggestions and willing to transform and willing to see that they are changeable. They are themselves changeable. The suffering stops. It stops. It decreases tremendously, if not eliminated. Because I'm in acceptance. I'm in pure acceptance of all things as they are. And if I have a quiet life, I also start to become quiet. If I have stress in front of me, there's something that's stressful, like an actual situation, then I'm able to confront that situation and I'd have the energy to do so because I'm not constantly in stress mode. I'm not overreacting. I'm not avoiding. I'm not going to extremes anymore. I'm able to confront whatever that's stressful, deal with the problem one thing at a time, and become more peaceful. So, as a therapist, I've collected this data of 4 things I'm going to talk about today of why people may not see fast change. And if you have these 4 thinking patterns or habits, you're going to have difficulty changing unless you digest some harsh truths about yourself and start accepting a new way of doing things. But I've collected these 4 and it took years in the making. It is important because for me to talk about change and barriers to change is part of my job as a therapist. I don't have a specific timeline that tells me a person needs to be at a certain place developmentally, emotionally. I don't have this kind of pressure. And the reason why is because I already know that it's about not more knowledge, but about person has to work their own barriers to change. They have to accept, eventually, they have to get to a point to accept that their own way of thinking, their own way of solving problems, the old ways have not been working. And so this may take some time for a person to actually start to admit that the way I've been solving a problem has not been working and I need a new way. So this specific process takes years at times, years, friends. So it's not the actual strategies, whether you think the strategies will work or even whether you're going to accept the strategies with no discrimination at all, which again takes years in the making to get to that place of desperation and openness to new suggestions. It takes years, friends, if we're lucky, because there are many people that will live a lifetime and not change their ways. And not change their ways or of doing things, solving a problem, looking at the world. They're willing to hold on to that all the way to the end. And that right there is the ultimate form of suffering. This level of attachment to your ideas, your thoughts, your beliefs, you're not willing to let them go. I mean, I can't think of a more painful existence than that. I want to make sure that I talk about therapy because first, it's really important that if you decide to go to therapy and you decide that you want those changes to happen, we got to keep an open mind. And in my experience, many people will come to therapy if there's a crisis. If there's a crisis that they finally need help with, and they get desperate enough to need help, which is important. Again, I tell you, that's when people decide to make significant changes. But I really, really respect and honor the fact that there are some people that come in just to do the preventative work, just to continue to self-examine, just to continue to challenge themselves to do better, to be better the next day. And I want that to be if it's up to me, I want that to be the typical practice that everybody has to self-examine, from childhood all the way to adulthood and later age. I want us to continue to challenge ourselves and continue to self-examine gently and kindly to become better, to be better humans. If I don't do that, then I'm stuck with old beliefs. They're not evolving, and they're not growing with me as I am growing. And as my environment is changing, I'm not changing with it. So I will definitely experience that suffering. So I think it is best practice, if you're asking me, and you have the opportunity and the ability to do so, I really want you to think of therapy as a regular practice, a regular healthy practice. Just like you want to go to the gym and exercise, I don't know why people think that it's not the same thing to exercise our self-examining muscles, to challenge our thinking process, to change and clean our house, our inner house up. It's kind of like it doesn't make sense just to do stuff without doing it from the inside out. You are in everything that you do. And when you are not in alignment on the inside, if you're not aware, if you're not emotionally available to yourself, I don't know how you're doing things in the outside of you without this alignment. It would not be done as sustainably, as mindfully. So it's wonderful to have the opportunity, if you do have it, to go to therapy, make it as consistent as you can make it, of course, practice. So this way you're not just going there only when there's a crisis, which is absolutely fine. That's definitely needed. I would do the same, but also go to prevent crises from happening. That's what we want to ultimately do. I want to prevent people from reaching an emotional crisis, because that part we can control. It just tells us about our adaptive skills, because most crises are done on the inside, because we perceive them as a crisis because they are an unexpected outcome for the most part. So we just have difficulty adapting to change is the best way to say that. That's what a crisis is for most people. So all this is important to keep in mind. And this takes me to our 4 thinking patterns that are resistant to change, that I've experienced, whether in therapy or even out of it. When I'm watching or observing people in general, I'm thinking, okay, that's if they're not changing, they probably have one of those 4 things, if not multiple. And that's okay. If you have it within you, please identify it. These are golden nuggets that can help you transform. To have the humility to identify one of those things in you or multiple things, it's wonderful. Identify it so you can make changes and start to accept and receive new information. If you're seeing it in another person, I want you to also accept that they have their own timeline. you thinking that you can change another person is downright impossible. And I need you to accept that. You cannot change another human being. You either have to accept where they're at and definitely know that the problem is bigger than you. You're going to understand that the problem today is going to be much bigger than you. And that's okay. That's okay. I need you to surrender the need to control people. They're allowed to be where they're at. You just decide what you would like to do because of that. Not what you'd like to change in them to get comfortable, but what you would like to do within yourself to change. And if you need to make a decision regarding your boundaries or whatever you need to do, but changing another person, I need you to surrender the need to do so today. And hopefully you will after those 4 things that you're going to identify. So the first coping pattern or thinking pattern that interferes with whether a person is going to change or not. Usually a person that has difficulty changing will demonstrate, number 1 is self-victimization. So whenever they're confronted about their need to change, whenever life shows them that their patterns of thinking, their patterns of decision making or problem solving isn't working anymore, what they've been doing isn't working anymore, the person will immediately self-victimize. They'll blame, that's another way to say that. They'll blame the other person, the way they said it. People are out to get me. They won't listen to the actual message or what their suffering really means. All they'll do is justify why they don't need to change by simply self-victimizing that people are out to get me. Why do people always attack me? They're not willing to see that people are responding to something, and it might be important to see what in me they might be expecting or responding to. And the person who self-victimizes will consistently blame others. They will have difficulty seeing those important things within themselves. They will just quickly go to people are bad and I don't trust people. They're out to get me. Nobody ever treats me fairly. There's difficulty seeing feedback as feedback, and accountability taking here is very, very limited with self-victimization, which is one of the main things that propels change is my ability to take accountability for myself and my reactions, my responses, my thinking. And a person who self-victimizes will certainly not do that. So in therapy, this client will definitely have difficulty resisting change. And I'm aware of that. So I'm very patient with them if they will continue to allow me to work with them, because sometimes they have difficulty challenging thinking distortions or challenging their beliefs. They just want to be affirmed constantly. They want to be validated that they are right, And when there's a little bit of questioning whether their problem solving was maybe not the healthiest, or we could have done it in a different way, they're not willing to look at it most of the time. They're just going to blame others and just refuse to see their part. And they're allowed to be there. Each one of those individuals I'm going to talk about today, or those types of character traits, everybody's allowed to be where they're at. I am very patient with it. I don't want to rush anybody. If they're still coming into session, I'm going to have to do my job and maybe have them think about things, ask questions to help them critically think about their lives and self-examine. But it's up to the person to accept how much they'll allow that to happen, is the best way to say that. So everybody's allowed to be where they're at. I even as a therapist, I know that people have free will and they're allowed to be wherever they're at. They could take this all the way to the grave. They don't have to change for me or for anybody, but I take it seriously, and I'm very passionate about helping people discover those beautiful aspects of themselves and the capability for change and setting themselves free from old beliefs. I'm very passionate about it, and I'm patient. I'm willing to go along for the ride as long as you allow me in, and that you keep coming, and I will be there. I will be there with you. You're not alone. As long as you're allowing me to be there. So, okay. Self-victimization is the first one. The second thinking pattern that will definitely interfere with change is the person who is mostly self-preserving or self-reliant. The best way to describe this type of character would be a person who has grown up with protective or needing to protect themselves, whether it's because of trauma, because they've been let down so many times by their caregivers. So they had to become self-reliant, meaning taking care of themselves, taking care of their own needs. And to some extent, we have that in different levels as humans. But for the person who has difficulty with change, usually they have that to an extreme because they've learned that they have to rely on themselves. And some of the beliefs that they are asked to change may go against how they've been protecting themselves for years. So an example would be if I asked a person to be kind to their partner and maybe release some expectations and start just loving them as they are, the person will automatically be defensive in this case, and they'll say something like, you're asking me to be weak, or they're going to take advantage of me. That's a common response with a person who's self-preserving or self-reliant. They have a strong fear that a person will take advantage of them, which is not the reality. They're an adult. They're aware. They can give something and they can stop giving if they really feel that somebody's taking advantage of them. But what we don't want to do is continue to respond to everybody. It's a general thing. I'm responding to everybody by being self-preserving, protective, defensive. I say things like, I don't trust men, or I don't trust women. I don't get along with a whole population. I don't get along with a whole thinking pattern. Like, it's very difficult for this person who's self-preserving to see people as they are. They usually see them from a protective stance as kind of, they judge them in a way to protect themselves. So if I think people are not to be trusted, I'm constantly suspicious. I'm constantly not allowing vulnerability to happen. But in turn, although this protects me, in turn, it also does something else, which is it keeps me from connecting with people and building profound relationships with people, actual connections, because vulnerability is where all the fun is. With a self-preserving person who will not risk vulnerability, they're going to be lonely. They're going to be lonely. They might be with someone, but they will not get the full benefits that comes with vulnerability. So the quality of the relationship will just suck, is the best way to say that, because they have difficulty with vulnerability, and they'll be protecting themselves even in their relationship. They're not going to allow for love and compassion and active listening and all those wonderful things, because they will perceive them as weak, perhaps, and they have to get their needs met, and they don't rely on other people, and they will not allow themselves to rely appropriately on other people to also meet their needs. So they become extremely defensive, and they will be aggressive in the way they're meeting their needs, in a way where it almost looks like, I don't really care about how you feel. It's about me constantly meeting my need from you, getting what I need from you, and it doesn't matter how you feel about it. So I can argue with you. I want you to do this, and I want you to do that, and I want you to do this, but I really won't be gentle, loving, and kind. I'm just going to demand all this stuff from you. And I think in my head, if I'm this person who's self-preserving, I think that I'm going to be kind to you and loving to you if you give me more of this stuff. But in reality, I just don't practice kindness and compassion. And so I'm not willing to give it away until I see it from you, and then I'm able to give it. And it's like, that's not how it works. A lot of times we're in charge of our own reactions, and we give what we need to give away. And sometimes even if we don't get it back, it's okay to give it away because it just makes us healthy. I like to give away compassion because it makes me healthier. I don't feel good when I don't give away compassion and kindness and love. It doesn't feel good to me. And I've learned that. So self-preservation is one that if I don't get this straightened out, I'm going to shoot myself in the foot. I will not allow for change because I need to rely on myself. I'm not going to get weak. So it sounds just like that in somebody's mind. The third thing that a person that may have resistance to change demonstrates is the need to control. Again, this also goes with the self-preservation part. If I've grown up in a situation where I had very little control, later on, I become obsessed with the need to control outcomes. But I may not call it control. Those individuals don't just say, oh, I'm controlling outcomes. They're calling it something else. Like, for example, if a wife is trying to have her husband consistently do something, she doesn't think of it as control, for example. She'll think of it as I'm just communicating with him. I'm just communicating with him, and I want him to do the specific thing, to prioritize a specific thing, and he's not. So I keep telling him over and over again, and I'm like, okay, we're not accepting that this is not a priority, and I have to work with what that means to me. You're going to continue to want this person to have this outcome that you desire, which of course is going to cause suffering, because people have free will. And they'll know when you're trying to control something that you cannot control. So this person who has a need for control and does not know when to stop will continue to suffer and have difficulty changing, because to surrender control to them also would mean a sign of weakness. And in their past experiences, surrendering control felt terrible to them, felt disappointing, traumatic at times. So they have not worked out that although the trauma isn't there anymore, they don't need to control outcomes. They have not adjusted to that reality. So they will continue to do those behaviors or responses that really are not necessary. They're not necessary, and they're just going to create resistance from the people around them. People will start to push away from them or fight back. And they're not going to get eventually the response that they want. There's no pleasure in attempting to control outcomes with people. People are people. The question is, what would you like to do with yourself when you discover somebody is not kind or may have betrayed you or whatever the case is? You don't go to them and tell them change. You just have to use this information and decide what you need to do for your own protection and for theirs too, because maybe they cannot change. Me trying to make them change consistently is unkind. The universe does not look at that kindly. We have free will, and it's pretty obvious that I cannot make a person change. People decide to change when they decide to change. So to go against that is unnatural, and it'll blow up in my face. It'll blow up in my face, and it has. Friends, it has. So the quicker you surrender, the better, and that you're more than likely to change when you have control over your need to control. I hope that makes sense. Pretty important, that one. So this person will have difficulty changing as well. And if you have that in you, we can clean that up. Let's all make an intention to clean that up and surrender a lot more. Let things go a lot more. And letting go is a sign of strength and self-control and discipline, not a sign of weakness. We need to redefine that for ourselves before it just runs us all the way to stress, diseases, and eventually to the early grave. That's how serious that is. The need to control and that level of anxiety that comes with it. Okay. Finally, the last thinking pattern or coping that hinders change for many people is when a human, or a client in my case, is intellectually driven. You would think that intellect is a great thing in the world of change, but I assure you, it is not the primary thing. Many of us may intellectually know what the right thing to do is, what the right thing to say is, how the right way to respond and the right way to think might be. But a lot of us will not do that. Will not do what is intellectually correct. What we will do is what is emotionally familiar, what is subconsciously driven. And the subconscious doesn't care if it's rational. It just has old beliefs in there that may have been, again, used for a form of protection or a form of survival that may have been beneficial when I was a kid. Today, they're not useful, but I will still find them familiar and habitual. They'll come whenever I need them. Even if I don't need them, I'll feel them and I'll remember them and I'll respond on them. So even if I know what the right thing is, I'll still respond on these old beliefs emotionally because I feel them emotionally. And I think that because I feel them emotionally, they must be true. They must be right. but they are not necessarily so. They are certainly habitual and familiar, and they may come from my past, and I need to be honest with what they were originally developed for. That coping skill in particular, what was it originally developed for? I don't need to respond that way, even if the emotion is familiar. And if it comes up, I need to intellectually interfere and say, okay, this is what the right thing to do. Let me do it. Even if I feel different about it, I need to do the right thing. But unfortunately, people separate their intellectual thought process from their emotional brain. And they say things like, well, yeah, I know that this is what I'm supposed to do, but I feel like this, and I feel angry, and I feel upset, and I feel like I'm offended. I feel disappointed. And so they react on the feeling. They use that as a form of rationalization and justification to act on that feeling rather than intellectually doing what is the right thing to do. So they separate it, and it stays separate for people. And that in itself, unfortunately causes resistance to change. So rationalizing fully emotionally is not healthy, or rationalizing intellectually also is not a healthy process either. Because if we solved our problems purely by an intellectual nature, then people wouldn't need therapy. We kind of intellectually know how a problem can be solved, but we don't respond that way. Right? So we have to consider that the intellectually driven person is going to have a hard time changing, because they can read a lot of self-help books, they can listen to a lot of audio, but until they actually apply changes and go past the emotion, then they're going to have difficulty changing in general. So this person is going to be waiting for the exact directions needed. Like they're waiting for the exact step-by-step directions, but that's not how emotions work. Emotions work with different type of rules, and we have to learn emotionally how to deal with them and to integrate the rational part along with the emotion. So it's like a marriage of both, a balance of both to be able to deal with life. So if I am completely reacting on emotions, I'm going to go to extremes, because sometimes I feel angry. And if I think my anger is the full-blown truth, I'm going to react on it, and God only knows what's going to come out of that. And if I'm completely intellectual, then I miss the part that the emotional nuances that I need to remember, and that people are not robots, they're conscious beings, and I need to work with that. And I'm a conscious being, and I need to work with that. So this individual will take a long while if they're purely intellectually driven, or emotionally driven for that matter. This individual will resist change because they either say things like, well, can you tell me how to do that? And no matter how many strategies and tools I give, instructions I give, they're not willing to emotionally apply it, to integrate the emotional part of it, which eventually is like, they say, I need more books. I need more knowledge. I need more knowledge. And I'm like, we don't need more knowledge. We just need to apply the responses, the new responses you want. We don't need to intellectualize them. We don't need to wait for the feeling to be corresponding with the right thought. All we need to do is do the right thing. Even if I feel angry, what's the right response? I'm going to be generous, kind, respectful, even when I'm angry. I'm just going to have to do those things that are difficult to do when you're in the middle of a situation where you're angry or you're hurt. You're going to have to do those things. And man, I understand. I can relate. I don't get that perfect. I am an emotional human being, and I got to work with the fact that I feel sometimes angry. I feel disappointed. And how will that affect the way I respond? Sometimes I'm mindful and thoughtful about it, and I can interfere with that. And sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not. And that's okay. If I can apologize about it, I can correct it in some way, I will do that. I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm just trying to be better than yesterday. Just a little better than yesterday. That's all I'm trying to be. And if we just do it one little itty bitty tiny step at a time, then we are going to get somewhere. We're going to see progress. We're going to see change. But again, working on this idea of intellectualization. If you're overly intellectual, for me, I see that when there's an extremely intellectual client who just wants to read books, who rehearses things from books, who can rehearse a whole chapter for me. But when it comes to responding and doing things differently, they're not willing to emotionally take the risk to do that. They're waiting to intellectually be ready to emotionally do something is the best way to say that. To emotionally have the feeling so they can actually do it. Then they're gonna be able to do it. So I have to feel kindness towards a person before I act or respond kindly. That's what this intellectual person is thinking. I have to get the thought process. Not only that, but I have to feel it, both of them together, for it to be quote unquote real. And so I can actually act that way. So they're waiting to feel differently. And so they're thinking that the more knowledge that they have, the more books that they read, that maybe this will solve the problem. And of course they find that it doesn't, because change requires just doing stuff that is extraordinary, stuff that I never thought I could do, but I gotta do it. Stuff that sometimes may not even make sense to do in the moment. I don't want to be kind to a person who's cruel, for example, but change requires me to do that, to take those leaps, to take those steps, to become better than the situation that I'm in, to become much better than the situation I'm in. And so those things are very difficult for a person who's intellectually driven to understand, because they think that the intellect and the emotion has to match. And then that is how we're going to do it. Or maybe I can know enough stuff, enough information that it can save me from having to do the feeling and the action change that I need to do. And that will be a person that's going to resist change, but they're not doing this consciously. None of these individuals, friends, are doing this consciously. Most of the time it's a subconscious response, a protective response, and one can understand and empathize towards. That's why I'm very patient with that. I will nudge a little bit, as long as it's comfortable for the person. I believe in what I do. That's why I know that change takes time, but not because change itself is what takes time, but our buy-in to change is what takes longer. So I hope this was helpful to you. I really appreciate your time. And man, we are together for another year. I'm glad we made it this far. And we are certainly in for a wonderful year of transformation. I just feel it. 2025 is the year of setting the intention to transform. So please do set it along with me, the intention to make this year just a little better than last year. And we're on our way. It doesn't have to be extravagant here. Just a little better than last year will be a great accomplishment. So if you want to change quickly, the biggest skill that I want you to develop, that I hope I continue to develop, is the skill of humility. Humility receives information. Humility applies information. It says, I don't know enough and I'm willing to know. I'm teachable. I can learn new things. That's what the skill of humility does. Children have that in abundance, which is why they learn beautifully. They can learn and learn and learn. As we age, unfortunately, I think humility decreases and more ego is built and our need for mastery is built. And that's okay. That's part of our confidence. But I think it's important to temper that and make sure that you have a good, healthy dose of humility to be able to receive new information and to adapt and to thrive, friends, to thrive, because change is all about thriving. And sometimes when we resist change, we're not allowing ourselves to grow. And then there goes depressive symptoms and every other disorder you could think of that really is going to interfere with your quality of living. So if you are practicing humility, you're basically going to be able to work past all those resistances that I've talked about today and find yourself leaps and bounds doing things that you never thought you'd be doing. Amazing things. So let's engage in humility. And if you want an episode on humility and what that entails, I talk about it a lot and I plug it into almost as many episodes as I can make it in, because it's one of those qualities that I know cognitively is tremendous When I see humility in a person, I'm like, this is the person I would hire to work for me, because they're teachable. They're willing to take feedback. They're just an easier human. They feel easier. They feel warmer. They feel kinder. So humility is the cure for all of that I just talked about today. So if you don't remember anything, remember the cure. It's humility. Learn about that. Google it. Get the study on the idea of humility. What's it mean? What does it look like? Apply humility. Take those big leaps and bounds so you can actually see some change. It's not enough just to think about it. And the safety of your thoughts, it's important to also act on it. And I know that you could do it. This is the year where we're going to do it and practicing what it looks like when you apply humility. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I love you guys. I'm glad that you're with me on this year. You're not alone and I'm not alone, and we are here to help one another. So thank you so much for all your help. You humans out there, you helped me a lot this year. And many of you, I don't even know their names. I don't even know your names, but thank you so much for helping me, taking my calls, serving my food, helping me in very difficult situations this year. Thank you, all you humans that I don't know your names and I may not remember your faces, but I know how you felt to come to my aid, and people that I love, those very difficult situations. So thank you. And everyone, I'm sending you love and light. Simon Weil said, real genius is nothing else but the supernatural virtue of humility in the domain of thought. This has been an episode of Drive-thru.